Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. I'm Clarisse Fortuné. Our top stories. Joseph Boakai on the verge of becoming Liberia's next president with over 50% of the votes. A tight second round that was largely peaceful, according to observers. Ousmane Sonko blocked from running for president. The Supreme Court has rejected a previous ruling. Another legal setback for the detained opposition leader who just returned to prison after being hospitalized amid a hunger strike. Nairobi hosted talks about plastic pollution around the world. Kenya wants to lead by example after a legislation that requires producers to take responsibility for the waste they generate. And we begin in Liberia, where results from more than 99% of polling stations have been announced. Opposition leader Joseph Boakai is on track to become president with over 50% of the vote, over President George Weah with 49%. Justine Baidu joins us live by phone from Monrovia with the latest. So, Justice, what do we know so far?
We are currently in the residence of Liberian opposition leader Joseph Boakai, and I can say that hundreds of people are still pouring in from all over Monrovia to celebrate what they say is a historic victory for the man who was the vice president to Africa's first elected female president. The Liberian National Electoral Commission says it is yet to collate 100% of all the electoral results, but what they have so far makes it clear that Mr. Boakai, it would be definitely Liberia's next president, and the celebrations have already started all across Monrovia and many other parts of the country.
And so far, do we have any official reaction from either Joseph Boakai or George Weah?
There hasn't been any official responses yet. The supporters that have gathered at Mr. Boakai's residence have been calling on him to come out and celebrate with them, but not yet any official response from himself or from the party. Mr. President Weah himself hasn't said anything at all. Neither has his CDC political party. Earlier today, we had wind that both parties had planned victory celebrations across the capital city, but the police had stepped in to stop both of them from going ahead, fearing what could have happened if they did go ahead. We wait to tomorrow, where it is expected that the Electoral Commission will put finality to what should be the final declaration of the results. But many of the people who have been speaking to us, mainly Joseph Boakai supporters, say this is a big win for Liberia, and they do expect Mr. Boakai to lead a corruption-free nation.
Thank you very much, Justine Baidu, live from Monrovia. Thank you very much for monitoring the situation. And while you were saying we are waiting for the official results, Boakai supporters have already been celebrating.
Today's victory is for every Liberian, so I'm over excited. And we believe in Ambassador Joseph Boakai because we see a lot of things in Ambassador Boakai. We see him as the only alternative for Liberia.
I'm overjoyed because I choose the right decision. I made the right decision, and I choose to vote for the right of my children and their future.
He's a man of integrity, a noble man. I believe that my vote did not go to waste, because when I vote Joseph Boakai, he will do the best thing for Liberia.
And now to Senegal. Ousmane Sonko has once again been blocked from the 2024 presidential race. Senegal's Supreme Court has overturned a judgment that was allowing the detained political opponent to run for office. Sonko has faced a string of legal headaches in recent years, which he and his lawyers say are attempts to thwart his political career. Charlotte Hughes.
It's a blow to Ousmane Sonko's chances of running in Senegal's 2024 presidential election. On Friday, the country's Supreme Court ruled against reinstating him on the electoral roll. It comes just hours after a court of the West African bloc, ECOWAS, said that Senegal did not violate the rights of the jailed opposition figure. who had filed a case claiming the state treated him unfairly. In the run-up to the decisions, Sonko had called for resistance.
I'm appealing to all people of Senegal, to our patriotic instinct and to the fundamental values of resistance, to prepare and stand up on the 17th of November to preserve our democracy.
Not all avenues are exhausted for the presidential hopeful, as the case will be retried in the Dakar High Court. Sonko, who came third in the 2019 presidential election, has faced a string of legal headaches in recent years. In June, he was found guilty of morally corrupting a young person and sentenced to 2 years in prison. The conviction made him ineligible to stand in next year's elections. He was detained late July on other charges, including endangering state security, fomenting insurrection, and criminally associating with a terrorist body. Sonko and his lawyers argue the court's cases are part of a plan to thwart his political career. His legal woes sparked rioting this year that left 16 dead, according to the government. The worst unrest in Senegal in decades.
And meanwhile, Cheikh Anta Diop University, Senegal's leading higher education establishment, has been closed since June when violent political protests surrounding Sonko's troubles rocked the country. The government evacuated the campus back then for security reasons, and students are yet to return, much to their frustration. Sarah Sako, Eliman Dao, and Sam Bradpiece.
Cheikh Anta Diop University, also known as UCAD, has been closed for more than 5 months, leaving 80,000 students in limbo. The Dakar campus was shut down following an unprecedented period of political unrest in Senegal. Many students are desperate to return, including Alioune, a fifth-year medical student who is now questioning his future.
I don't know if I'll have the strength to continue with my studies next year if I lose a whole year at university, because medicine is a really demanding course. I need to do 8 or 9 years of studies as well as a specialisation. If I lose a year, will I have the strength to go on? Will I be motivated enough?
On June 1st, Senegalese opposition leader Ousmane Sonko was sentenced to 2 years in prison over a sex scandal. Some of his supporters subsequently ransacked the university, setting fire to buildings and buses. 2.7 million euros in damage was caused in one part of the campus alone. 5 months on, much of this is still visible. University authorities say they are unwilling to take any risks by reopening the campus prematurely.
For the moment, we cannot give an opening date. When there's a threat like this, you must take responsibility to ensure that it doesn't happen again. That is what the authorities have been working on since June 1st. The material damage is easy enough to fix, but we must look at the security risk.
Lecturers are maintaining a distance learning policy for the rest of the 2022-23 academic year. A reopening date is expected to be announced before November 30th.
2 rebel groups from Sudan's Darfur region said they will fight alongside the army in a country's civil war. The Justice and Equality Movement, led by Jibril Ibrahim, and the Sudanese Liberation Movement, with Mini Minawi, issued a joint statement which end their neutrality stance. The 2 movements said they denounced the paramilitary RSF's numerous violations. Our regional correspondent, Olivia Bizot, has more.
Jibril Ibrahim and Mini Minawi had initially pledged neutrality when they signed the Juba 2020 peace agreement. But they're now saying that they can't just stand by and watch in the face of atrocities committed by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. Now, in recent weeks, the RSF has made major advances in the western region of Darfur, where they're being accused of ethnic cleansing. They've captured major cities, including the country's second biggest city of Niala, and they forced the army to retreat from major zones of this conflict. Last week, reports emerged accusing the RSF of massacring hundreds of people. Now, it's impossible for us to verify these reports, but the UN and the EU have said that they are credible. So in their joint statement, the 2 rebel leaders expressed their concern over these major advances by the RSF. They're also very afraid that the RSF is going to declare its own government in the western region of Darfur, effectively splitting the country in two. Now, since the beginning of the war, which broke out in April, thousands of people have been killed and 7 million people have been displaced, according to the UN.
And in other news, in brief, nearly 50 civilians have been killed in Ethiopia's Amhara region over the past month. The country's second most populous region has been racked by unrest for months, with a number of clashes between the Ethiopian military and ethnic Amhara militia known as Fano in recent weeks. Aid agencies described it as flooding seen only once every 100 years. At least 130 people have died in Ethiopia, Kenya and Somalia following heavy rains. The Kenya Red Cross Society reported that hundreds of houses were swept away at the coast and in northern Kenya, leading to the death of more than 50 people and forcing at least 30,000 people out of their homes. Zimbabwe declares state of emergency in its capital. Harare has been badly hit by a cholera outbreak that has affected all provinces. The country has recorded more than 7,000 suspected cases and 100 deaths. At least 12 people have died in Harare. International delegations were in Nairobi this week for fresh talks over a landmark international treaty to combat plastic pollution. As negotiations drag on, Kenya has to contend with its own plastic waste crisis despite introducing a string of legislation aimed at reducing pollution in recent years. Laurent Berstecher has the story.
As if freshly risen from the ground, large plastic hills overlook the Nairobi skyline. In the giant Dandora landfill that borders the Kenyan capital, waste continues to pile up despite the government's efforts to limit plastic consumption. Yet some measures are beginning to bear fruit. This dairy products factory recently modified its bottles to make them easier to recycle.
In 2023, we've shifted our drink yogurt packaging, our 1 liter fresh milk and 2 liter fresh milk to clear bottles, and we've gotten very positive feedback from the recyclers.
After a 2017 ban on single-use plastic bags largely fell flat, Kenyan authorities introduced new legislation in 2020 requiring producers to take responsibility for the waste that they generate. And while the measure hasn't been enough to fully curb plastic pollution, recyclers say mentalities are beginning to change.
Clear PET, is a better devil to live with because we can easily be able to fully recycle it and get it back, into the market. Having these producers take a bit of responsibility gives us assurance that we have got a job to go to.
Earlier this week, government delegations gathered in Nairobi to discuss a landmark international treaty against plastic pollution. As they continue to hammer out the details, activists are calling for tangible commitments to reduce global plastic production by 75% over the next 20 years.
Well, that's it for this edition. Thank you for watching Eye on Africa. Keep watching France 24 for more news.